Peter Dutton will say anything if it suits his agenda. And this video will show you a perfect example of this. Now, question time in Parliament can get pretty juvenile, but this session was especially chaotic as the Liberals tried to pull some kind of stunt.
Australians are demanding answers from this government.
Order.
Now, I don't think the Australian public are seeing a level of transparency.
Members on my right will cease reject.
They are embarrassed. Completely embarrassed.
There's been continual, non-stop yelling on both sides of the chamber.
For context, what's happening is that the Liberals are trying to generate controversy. And it's all because of the government's decision to block Qatar Airways from having more flights into Australia. And all of a sudden, the coalition apparently has grave concerns about this matter. Anyway, more on the details later in the video. For now, I want to focus on Peter Dutton, because in the midst of all the huffing and puffing, he had this to say.
Australians are demanding answers from this government. The Prime Minister's off overseas on another overseas flight.
The overseas trips he's criticising include the ASEAN Summit, which is an important conference with Southeast Asian countries, and then the G20 Summit. In fact, it would have been controversial if Albanese didn't go. But that's of no importance to Dutton.
The Prime Minister's off overseas.
Now, these remarks aren't surprising, but what is what he said just one day beforehand. This is where you get to see how Dutton operates.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Well, I want to offer very strong words of support to the Prime Minister. We can have our arguments domestically and in this chamber, but when the Prime Minister steps onto the international stage, it's important that our trading partners and friends hear a very united message. Similarly, in terms of the other legs of the Prime Minister's trip, it's important for us to send a very clear message that at this time we do want to strengthen our relationships, our ties across all of the areas detailed by the Prime Minister. We wish the PM every success in the trip because it is important for our country's future and we stand ready to support the outcomes of the statement the Prime Minister referred to as well.
Truly a politician who will say anything. Kind of reminds me of Scott Morrison. Now, if we just move on to the Qatar issue, which sparked all of this, I'm still trying to understand what the big controversy is. I guess the accusation is that Labor is protecting Qantas's interests by blocking another carrier from increasing flights into major Australian cities. This is all still developing, and it may come out that there was some dodgy dealings, or it could turn out to be a complete non-issue. There's going to be a Senate inquiry looking into this, and if it does turn out to be something serious, I may well do a video on it. In the meantime, the Coalition has been asking the Labor Transport Minister, Catherine King, questions about the Qatar decision over and over again. Here's one question, asked by a previous Coalition Transport Minister. Remember that, because it will be relevant later on.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government. Did the Minister have a conversation with Alan Joyce regarding Qatar's application before the decision was made?
And this was her answer that sparked the fake fury from the Coalition.
The Minister has the call.
Thank you very much to the member for Riverina for his question, and I really welcome the question that's come specifically from him because I've got a little bit to say about his role in international aviation services agreements as well. As you would expect, my department undertook consultation with all relevant aviation stakeholders, and I was aware of different stakeholders' views when I took the decision. I do meet routinely with the CEOs of all of the airlines, airports and peak bodies, and from my recollection, the main people lobbying me about Qatar came from Virgin and a third party into my office on behalf of Qatar, and the discussions I've had recently with Qantas have been about their concerns about our same job, same pay legislation. But because I am asked about this matter of international aviation service agreements, which is what this question is about,
The member for Lawler
I wonder why you don't want me to answer this.
I ask for your ruling in relation to whether the minister is relevant to the very tight question that was asked. I ask for your ruling in relation to this matter.
We're seeking clarification from this side of the House. What is your ruling? Is the minister in order?
Well, the minister is in order to make sure that. Are you seeking the call again? The leader of the manager of opposition business.
I move dissent in the ruling of the Speaker, understanding what I decided. And the reason that we are moving dissent is because you made a ruling that the minister was in order, and what we are putting to the House is that the minister was not in order because she was not being relevant to what was a very tightly worded, narrowly defined question. And so that is the basis on which...
Now, it seems to me that she was answering the question. Whether the answer is true or not is a different issue, but as far as question time goes, that's a better answer than I routinely heard from Scott Morrison or his ministers. But what stands out to me is that Labor's approach to Qatar Airways, whether it's right or wrong, doesn't seem to be different from the previous Liberal government. And that's why this is clearly a stunt attempting to generate a media controversy. The stunt backfired on Dutton though, because at the end of it all, most of question time was wasted, and the Transport Minister got to finish her answer from before, and I found that answer enlightening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to actually answer a question on aviation policy, because this is what the previous government was trying to stop me saying before. It might be useful to remind the House that requests for additional capacity are made routinely to governments around the world, including Australia, and these requests are not always granted, including by those opposite. In fact, when the very same question was put in front of the member for Riverina, and he said, I quote, made a decision to put on hold an application by Qatar Airways. Well, that putting on hold was 4 years. That's not putting it on hold. That's actually not making a decision for 4 years, effectively a non-approval. And by the time a decision was actually taken, nearly half the Coalition's time in office had elapsed, and at the end of that 4-year hold, they were granted only an additional 7 flights per week. And so worried was the previous government about this airline, for the first time they added an anti-dumping clause to the International Air Services Agreement. Now, those new flights only started early last year, in 2022. That's when that new capacity, asked for in 2018, actually was given to Qatar. In the case of this Qatar Civil Aviation Authority's request, I determined that it was not in Australia's national interest to grant their request for an additional 28 flights per week. I know that there are some businesses and airlines that would have liked me to make a different decision, but I have not based that decision on any one company's commercial interest, but on the national interest. And again, as the member for Riverina has said, he introduced that safeguard article because, and I quote, you can't have an airline coming in from overseas and just undercutting to the point where Australian jobs are at risk and Australian airlines were placed at a disadvantage. And he said, you can't have an airline with very deep pockets, undercut, and people go to them as opposed to an airline that may be majority Australian-owned and unable to compete with this unfair undercutting of prices. Well, there you go. No wonder they didn't want me to answer the question about Qatar Airlines. The previous government has not got a leg to stand on with the way in which it gave $2 billion of JobKeeper to Qantas without any strings attached, saw hundreds of jobs outsourced without any possibility of saving them. Then thy name is hypocrite.
Order. Members on my right.
Now, I don't have a view as to whether the government's decision was right or wrong, and I'll wait until the Senate inquiry report comes out. But my take is that the Coalition is really getting desperate. They need to manufacture controversy, and it's just backfiring on them. The only positive is that this gives an insight into Peter Dutton's mind, someone who wants to be the future Prime Minister.